Draft, please remove themselves and let the quality people in. But at the end?
Do you have anything else to give out?
Oh yeah, sure.
So we'll do it at the end.
Yeah, okay. You want me to just go? Okay. All right. I've got permission to begin. Since my wife was not here, I could not find a higher authority than the pastor. So he will have to do. All right. Thank you for closing the door. That's great. Come on in. There are seats available. All right. We're going to talk about, dinosaurs are starting off with a great topic. And I see some young people here, and that is good. And I suspect there are some young at heart people here as well. So we are all welcome to join. Let's take a look at dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, in the Adventist context, is interesting because of some Ellen White quotations that you're familiar with, and we'll take a look at those. I have to tell you that some of you may have experiences in Adventist schools way back in the day on the subject of dinosaurs. I've had two people tell me at the Union Conference office that they could not talk about dinosaurs in school. So that is kind of sad because I kind of like them, as you'll find out. So let's take a look at dinosaurs. But let's have a word of prayer before we begin. So please, let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we take a look at these amazing animals, we pray that you'll guide us, help us to see clearly from Scripture and from Spirit of Prophecy what exactly they were. And may we see your great hand in creation. You are the great creator. Thank you, Lord, for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so here we go. Origin of dinosaurs. Now, actually the topic is sometimes titled this on dragons and dinosaurs. Dragons, because did you know the word dragon is in the Bible? So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan who deceives the whole world. Incidentally, I'm just a little bit hot. Can you tell that? I'm just a little bit loud. Is it because of this? Or I'm good? Okay. So the great dragon. Now, when you think of dragon, of course you know this is a reference to the devil. When you think of the word dragon, what is the image that pops up in your mind? Is it something like that? Kind of pointy and, whatever. Guess what? That is a medieval image. That is not an image that goes back to the Bible. Because the Greek word drakon literally means large reptile. That's all it means. And anything else you bring to the word is something you brought from other images and other places. That's important because, hang in there, because you'll see why that is important. So, what did they think about when they first found dinosaur fossils? What did they immediately recognize them for what they were? This is a guy, I'd like to tell kids when I show them this, is, don't you want to be a scientist? That's a dude. Look at the hair. All right. A scientist in 1676 at Oxford, the head of the chemistry department, actually came across a bone in England and wrote a paper, first scientific paper ever written about a dinosaur bone. Problem is, he didn't know what it was. And he thought it was from an elephant from the Roman era. There's enough of his drawings that exist that we know it was a dinosaur bone. So he took a guess that it was an elephant, and guess what? Sometimes scientists are wrong. This is a pastor, and he was pastoring in America, in Massachusetts, and the little town he was pastoring in New England had a bunch of footprints in the stone right as he entered the town. And he imagined, in 1836, he imagined that they're from giant birds. No, they were the footprints of dinosaurs, and sometimes pastors are wrong. Thought I'd, equal time. So, incidentally, you can go to Massachusetts today. For those of you who are familiar with the Rocky Hill Sabbath conference way back in the 1840s in the Adventist Church, just forming Rocky Hill. There's a giant museum there with footprints in the ground from this same basic deposit. In the early 1800s, they were finding things in England, and somebody found a tooth, and he said, well, I'll tell you what it looks like, but it can't be that. It's too big. It's 20 times the size of what I think it looks like, an iguana's tooth. So eventually they found a few more bones, and they came up with the idea of an iguana tooth. And that's the first rendering of what eventually would become a dinosaur. Isn't that funny looking? Anyway, they found more bones, and they think a little bit more like this now, maybe. But an iguanodon in England. They found another fossil, and they took it to be from an animal they called a Megalosaurus, a giant or big lizard. And look at that thing. Isn't that funny looking? I just love these old images. But it was a Christian that was a scientist named Richard Owen who actually coined the term dinosaur from two Greek words, which means awesome lizard, dinos. You've heard terrible lizard. Terrible is a terrible word. In the 1800s, it meant awesome. So awesome lizard was from this Christian scientist for the British Museum. Incidentally, those first two dinosaurs you saw, the Megalosaurus and the Iguanodon, they actually made plaster casts of what they look like and put them in an exhibition in 1851 in the Crystal Ice Palace in London. So people were introduced to what dinosaurs might be like. That was very close to the time that Darwin was writing his stuff. Dinosaurs would end up aiding evolution in terms of giving them stuff to support. But this is probably, I think, about one of the biggest, if not the biggest, development in the public knowledge of dinosaurs. Dr. Joseph Leidy was a scientist in Philadelphia. He had a little museum downtown Philadelphia. He heard about a woman over in New Jersey that had that had big bones in her backyard. He asked for permission to dig them up and assemble them in his museum, and that's what it looked like. And he called it a Hadrosaur in 1868. Folks, this is the first dinosaur skeleton ever put on display in the world. Now, every museum you can think of today worth its salt has a skeleton or two. You got to, right? This was the first one. No one had ever seen anything like this. You can imagine what evolutionists were beginning to say to creationists. They say, all right, you guys, where are dinosaurs in the Bible, in the Bible? Where are they? And of course, we had a couple of answers. One of them was, I don't know. And the second one was, I think the devil made those bones and put them in the ground to confuse us. So we didn't have really good answers to start off with. I'm talking about all creationists. Incidentally, he didn't have a skull. He had to make one out of paper mache and imagined what it looked like. Anyway, so that was the first thing. Incidentally, Philadelphia is in the United States. They figured out they could sell tickets. So they sold tickets. And the people went down the street and around the block. Other museums that were in the United States saw that and said, we got to have dinosaurs in our museum. So suddenly, there was this huge, stampede of dinosaur bone hunters going out to Montana and Wyoming and North Dakota and Colorado and Utah and Alberta, and looking for dinosaur bones. Incidentally, this is the first dinosaur found, a hadrosaur, and about that size. And they have not really found any more in the same place. They've looked. It's very interesting. It's a freak discovery to find it there in New Jersey. But anyway, interesting. So, like I said, dinosaur hunters were on the march. And they did just about everything illegal today, by today's standard, to get bones. So, yep. And dinosaur bones and skeletons were starting to show up in all the great museums of the world. For instance, this one on the right here is an American Brachiosaurus that made it to the Louvre in Paris about the turn of the century. Sensational stuff. Sensational stuff. Now, have you ever heard of a Brontosaurus? This is the Brontosaurus, the one that was put on display in New York. And it was put on display in 1905, and people from around the world came and said, that is a wonderful that specimen is amazing. Are you sure about the head? and turned out they had the wrong head on the dinosaur skeleton. They basically combined two animals and made it into a Brontosaurus. And to this day, if you want to get into a really vigorous discussion with a dinosaur nerd, and they are out there, ask them, so do you think there really is such a thing as a Brontosaurus? And they will have an opinion. But anyway, now behind that Brontosaurus display was this painting. When people saw that, it was easy to ask the big questions. What kind of world was this where these giant animals lived? What would it be like to live in those days? And it just really got publicity going for dinosaurs. Now, understand that for the first 50 years or so of dinosaur finding and displaying, they were only finding animals that appeared to be vegetarian by their teeth. They did not find any predators or carnivores until, so the only thing that was scary about them was their size, as in like a big elephant, don't get stepped on. But then they found something that changed everything. And they found that famous Tyrannosaurus Rex. Henry Osborn found it. I've been on the road in Wyoming. We were going down the road. A local was driving me down this gravel road. He said, Stan, do you see that hill up there? Yeah, that's where Osborn found it, the first T-Rex. Okay, put it on display, 1905. This is what it looked like. Now, if you didn't think this changed the image of dinosaurs overnight, whoa, now suddenly don't get munched is more than don't get stepped on. Talk a little bit about T-Rex for a minute because everybody is curious about T-Rex. All dinosaur bone collectors, like me, want something from a T-Rex just because of the drama. They're not particularly rarer than a lot of other dinosaurs, but the demand is like 100 times anybody else's. Everybody wants T-Rex. One thing we know about T-Rex is what they ate. They ate Triceratops. Now, here's my little T-Rex. I like this T-Rex because he's smiling. It's a friendly-looking dinosaur. Aww, aww, when you make a nice pet. But he did eat Triceratops. Now, how would we know that he had eaten some of this? In the stomach cavity of a skeleton, they found a T-Rex that still had some of his lunch in there. And when they looked, they found bits and pieces of Triceratops. And you might wonder about how could they tell from bits and pieces? Oh, they can tell. I have a Triceratops toe bone, just a toe bone. And if you were to show that to a serious dinosaur nerd, he could look at that thing and say, this is the middle toe of a right rear foot of a Triceratops. And he'd be right. They know that much about bones. So, but here's the big question that this doesn't answer. Was a T-Rex a predator or a scavenger, like a vulture? Did he clean up carcasses, or did he eat or catch live animals? And believe it or not, that's still unsettled, somewhat unsettled. Why would you wonder that that didn't make a very good predator? Those little arms. So there's some question as to whether or not it could catch anything. Also, it's frankly very heavy build here. So it doesn't look like it's particularly fast running. I like to say that Hadrosaurs lived in the same neighborhood as T-Rex, and these could run 25 miles an hour. How do we know that? Because T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. Ha! It worked. Okay. Now, what's really interesting is this fossil you see on the right. That is the fossilized, the preservation of a T-Rex and a Triceratops in the same little bunch there, same little deposit. And when they looked at the Triceratops, they found that there were teeth marks on the bones. When they looked at the T-Rex, they saw broken rib bones. So if I can tell you how that happened, I think there's only one explanation. Remember we were talking about the flood and the waters rising slowly? The waters were rising and there was a little hilltop, a little mound where both dinosaurs found themselves. And it got a little too close for comfort and they struggled a little bit. But somehow at the end of all that, they got covered up and buried right there. What else could it be? To be buried in the same place. Oh well, so was he a predator or a scavenger? Now T-Rexes, we do have footprints, a couple of them that are fairly certain. One is in an undisclosed place in New Mexico. That's this one. 33 inches long, 28 inches wide, 9 inches deep, very heavy. This was, for many years, the most famous T-Rex. His name was Stan. I'm not kidding. Stan. I've got souvenirs of Stan. So, for instance, this is a museum quality copy of a T-Rex, of a Stan tooth. I should say a tooth. This much showed. This was in the jaw, the root. This much showed. And just for a comparison, a lion's tooth, a canine, fang, be about like that. So just to give you an idea of perspective. But all predator, raptor teeth, I should say, are shaped like that. Only T-Rex is thick like that. And I'm telling you that because I know you, like I, will be on your eyes out looking to purchase. I mean, why wouldn't you want to buy a T-Rex tooth? I would think, come on. But anyway, the only reason this is a copy, as Pastor Joe can tell you, usually they pay pastors a lot of money. And our salaries, we don't know what to do with the money at the end of the month. So I usually buy good fossils with my money, you can see. But this one was just a little bit out of reach. This was be about $25,000 for the real thing. So anyway, so this T-Rex, Stan, when it was found, was the best ever found at 40% complete. 40% was the best they ever found, which means the one they found in Wyoming that named it was much smaller in terms of completeness. Here's a trivia question for you. How much of an animal needs to be found before it is technically a skeleton? What percentage? No. This one's a skeleton at 40. 10 is correct. Wow, what a good educated guess. 10%. Now, why is that important? That'll tell you something. If you ever see an article that comes out on the internet, in the Google News or something, and it says, dinosaur skeleton found, and it solves every single problem we've ever had in the world of evolution. Boy, here it is. And then you read, and it's like a hip bone and part of a knee, and it's, anyway. Not that I'm bitter about any of that. But then came a dinosaur named Sue, and you may have heard of Sue. Sue was discovered in 1990 in South Dakota. She was 90% complete, 90. And she currently resides in the Field Museum in Chicago, and you can go see. And incidentally, the Field Museum in Chicago is in America. They sell tickets to go see Sue. Now, incidentally, there's Stan and there's Sue. It might make you think we know their genders. We do not have a clue as to what the genders are of dinosaurs. Well, then how did they get these nicknames? It's based on the one who discovered it. So Sue, a woman named Sue, found Sue. And she found it, unfortunately, on Native American soil. There was already an agreement as to if they found anything, they could keep it, the people digging. However, when the Native Americans found out what they'd found, went to court, Native Americans won. So the people that did the work on it and finding it, preserved it and everything, didn't get anything for it. That's too bad, but I understand how it went. Larson Brothers. 2005, T-Rexes are creationists' friends. What did they do for us who believe in a short age of the earth? In 2005, they broke open some bones of a T-Rex leg, and they found soft tissue inside, including a bendable vessel and red blood cell stains. This is all organic material. Organic material disappears in a matter of a few thousand years, supposedly. Cannot be there if it's 65 million years old, which is the minimum age for a dinosaur bone. You can seal the bones in lead, and it will not preserve like this. So, thank you, Lord, for putting soft tissue in bones. Up to this point, no one had ever looked seriously at bones to find organic material still there. Now, you can almost hear bones cracking across the country. People are looking in fossils for organic material. And the last I saw, there was a list of at least 30 that were verified of organic materials found, proteins and so on. Yes? They don't. Here's the explanation. And the woman that was in charge of the group that found this material, when she published it, she got clobbered. I mean, the evolutionary scientists in the world just jumped on her. I don't know where the women's defenders were, women's rights, but they sure were gone at that point. And she was clobbered as doing shoddy. What kind of a scientist do you call yourself? What shoddy work? You know, I mean, to imagine that these things still had soft tissue. What did you do wrong? And how dare you publish it like this? And for goodness sakes, you know what the creationists are going to do with this? And, you know, all of this. And she was really lambasted. Now, there was a couple of comments that somebody made that she thought made sense. She went back and redid her work on it from scratch and came out with the same conclusion. And now science reluctantly admits that this is what it looks like. Now, what she said is a good science statement. Incidentally, she was a theistic evolutionist. So she believed in God, but believed in evolution. Anyway, she said this: either there's ways of preserving organic material that we have no concept of, or these bones are not as old as we thought. Now, that's a good science statement. I could buy that as a fair statement. So anyway, of course, you know where we are on that. No, they did not get DNA from them. DNA is one of the first things that breaks down, one of the very first things that are lost. Now, we've used studies based on how fast organic materials break down that they have done over the years. They've wondered, how long does protein stay? How long do these other things stay? And in every case, it's thousands of years, not millions. That's interesting. DNA. So yeah, what, Jurassic Park? Are you asking questions like that? And the mosquito and all that? Can't happen, but that's okay. Why does there have to be good science to make a good movie, right? Okay, never mind. Footprints. Fossil evidence. Footprints or fossil evidence. I'm going to just stop for a minute on this. How many of you have heard of human footprints and dinosaur footprints together, same strata? Have you heard of that? Let me tell you where supposedly that was found. Glen Rose, Texas, which is not far from Keene, Texas, and Southwestern Adventist University. This was promoted by a guy named Burdine, years ago, 30s, 1930s maybe, 20s even, somewhere in there. Seventh-day Adventist promoted this. And what he said was they are finding human footprints in the same tracks where there's hundreds of dinosaur footprints. So a few human, lots of dinosaurs. This has been thoroughly examined by people, Loma Linda University, geoscience, people that have no problem with the idea that humans and dinosaurs lived on the planet at the same time. So that's not an issue, no axe to grind. However, the best evidence that I have seen is the conclusions are consistently, we don't feel these are human footprints, the ones that are displayed. For instance, there would be a narrow footprint kind of for a while, and then a little further down the line, there'd be a bigger footprint of the whole dinosaur foot. Do you know what I mean? So the water affected some of the shaping. I could go into detail about this. Does anybody have a question? I usually step on somebody's kind of favorite theory about this when I talk about this. Yes?
So I'm trying to wrap my brain
Yeah,
around
yeah.
the Bible. I know they talk about large animals in the
Yes.
Bible. What am I missing? Is there something else in the Bible that
About size? About size?
or them
I'll tell you exactly where it comes from. And we have, of course, Ellen White who verifies. But where do we get it in the Bible? From a word that is really rare in Hebrew, and that's Nephilim. Nephilim is talking about there were giants in the land in those days. There were Nephilim in the lands in those days. What's Nephilim mean? Today, there's a whole lot of Jewish scholars who have no clue. So it's a kind of a dead word that existed a lot back then. But remember I talked about Septuagint earlier, Septuagint, which is how many thousand years closer to the original use of when Moses wrote it down? They saw that word, Nephilim, and when they translated into Greek, they used the word gigantes, giants. King James came along and they didn't have a clue what the word meant. But they looked at the Septuagint and they said, that's giants. Let's go with giants. So the King James has giants in there. And that's where we get it from the Bible, the idea that there were giants living in those days. Ellen White has verified it in some of the things she said. So can I leave that one there, or is that good enough? Yes, sir. They're finding lots of human footprints lately. I mean, they're finding them everywhere. Deserts, northern Africa, they're finding human footprints. The funny thing, they're all normal size. The ones that were purported to be with the dinosaurs, most of the time were size of today, which we would have a problem with thinking that people were taller back then. There are a couple of perfect footprints that are this big that your granddaughter could tell was carved out of rock very clearly. Perfect, not a little bit of, nowhere did the sand stick a little bit or it's just, you understand what I mean? It's too perfect to be a footprint that's natural. Now, what Burdine probably knew and found out about when he was going down there was the locals dug up the dinosaur tracks and they sold them. They cut them out of the ground and sold them. But they also, on a few occasions, took a dinosaur footprint and carved into it the shape of a human footprint, because they found out they could sell those to tourists really easily. Now, those circulated around, and so it made this whole subject foggy and hard to get to the bottom of. Do you understand? But in terms of finding a clear footprint today without anybody messing with it, they're just not there that are clearly human. Now, I don't personally think humans and dinosaurs lived in the same area code. I think they probably lived in different places.
Now, you've got a meteorite rock down there.
Yes, I do.
And it's been proven in the past where something that size right there, if it came down, the speed it came down, the weight it came down, it could create a huge footprint just by hitting it. Not foot, but I mean, it's got a large area because it's present.
That's a new one.
Okay.
I haven't heard that.
The guy that actually was doing telescope research.
Okay.
He actually did that. But the point is if you have somebody walking
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to somebody running,
Yes.
the footprints are going to be different.
Yes. What's really funny on footprints is in Africa. Do you remember the Leakey family? Any of you remember Leakey? National Geographic covers all the time back in the day. All right. Anyway, they were the ones discovering the human, so-called human ancestors in Africa, and they found some footprints of apparently an adult and a child walking next to each other in volcanic ash. Now, what makes that attractive is volcanic ash can be dated using modern techniques. What's funny is, now we don't agree with this date, but it's still funny. They dated the footprints to be something like 2.5 billion years old. Now, that is older than the ancestors that the Leakeys were finding, but the footprints were identical to modern footprints. So when Mrs. Leakey, Mary Leakey, who was like the last of the Leakey family still around, they asked her, well, what about these human footprints that date to 2.5 million years old that appear to be modern, like today? And he says, oh, there weren't any people living in 2.5 million years ago with modern footprints. So she completely dismisses the evidence that goes against her theory, just like out of hand. Couldn't be. It's just interesting. Yeah, so we wouldn't think they were 2.5 million years old either. But we didn't agree that she had found ancestors to humans. Some people wonder if dinosaurs were really reptiles. And there is I have a piece of rock right here that is this piece in the upper left that is actually showing the scales of a dinosaur. Because when it got covered up in the flood, that rock, that eventually became rock, and when they carefully open it, they can see the pattern of the skin still. And so, yes, they're reptiles. Now, eggs. When I was a kid, I thought a dinosaur egg must be about that big. Right? Wouldn't you have thought that? But guess what? This is a dinosaur egg. This is a real one from China. And this is as big as they get. This is as big as they get. Not kidding. The size of an ostrich egg. So is there a dinosaur in there? No, it's filled in, it's broken, it's been filled in. But it is in the same shape. So dinosaurs all started pretty small. Kind of cute. Okay, anyway. So anyway, they started small. That has ramifications for a few questions. Okay, guess what? You all could be digging up dinosaur bones this summer if you wanted to. And who wouldn't want to do that? Young people, come on, guys. Yeah, wouldn't you like to? Yeah, I can show you a place where you will find dinosaur bones. Only problem is you can't keep them, but you can find them because the people own the land. This is a place in Wyoming run by Southwestern Adventist University. Every summer in June, you can go for one day or the whole month, pay a little camping fee, bring your own gear, and you will be out there in the middle of nowhere, trust me. And you will be digging up dinosaur bones, like this young lady who is my assistant's little girl. Well, she's not so little. And she found a nice scapula there, and I've got a little bit of a rib. In fact, I got a big rib here. That's back when I had dark hair. Anyway, take a look. Can you see that little bitty bit of a squeegee bottle there? That is a substance that you pour onto the bone and immediately soaks into the bone, right into the bone. It's like a super glue, makes it very hard and easy to transport. There are the bones that are wrapped up. Before you actually remove them from their place, somebody will come over with a GPS ground positioning locator, put it right on the corner of the bones, and register their location within a fraction of an inch. They will eventually take a picture of those bones and take the picture and drop them in their location into an app like that, a program that shows just as though you remove the dirt and you can see them right in location where they were found. Isn't that amazing? That's cutting edge technology right there. In fact, that's 3D. You can turn it on its side and look at the layers like that. It's pretty interesting. So now as you're taking a look at this bone deposit, and almost all of these guys, the vast majority are bones from this guy, an Edmontosaurus, which is a hadrosaur. It's about a giraffe-sized dinosaur. And what do you not see in the picture? You don't see any heads, that's right. Skulls break the first. The skulls are the most delicate of all the parts of the body, and it will break. And if you ever find a skeleton with a skull, okay, you just financed a few things. So, what else can you not see there? What? How about connections? You see any hip bone to the leg bone to the, do you see any of that? These are all disarticulated bones, right? So they're not connected. That tells you something about what happened when they got put here. Also, if you look carefully at the edges of some of the bones, you see evidence that they were rolled. Some of the corners seemed a little smooth. So here's what happened. Oh, before I tell you what happened, I asked Dr. Art Chadwick there, who's the head of this, or at least the emeritus head. I asked him, have you surveyed the area, how large of an area this is, how many animals we've got represented here? He says, we think we're looking at the remains of at least 10, maybe 20,000 hadrosaurs. What happened to them? And what apparently happened to them is whatever killed them, or however they died, their bodies were transported in water. And not just a little ways, probably miles. And in the transportation of these bodies started to fall apart. The skulls broke and everything else. It's a little gross, but that's what happened. And eventually, they settled in a little basin, a big basin, and got covered up and buried in about, it's not even 3 feet of material and buried there. Now, what does that sound like to you? The only thing that could do that is one of the actions of the flood. So this is good. This is proof of the flood going on here. Incidentally, I have to tell you this. There's a creation scientist who was so funny. I mean, I love him. He's cracking jokes all the time. You could tell I would like him. And he said, you know, there's all these theories about what happened to the dinosaurs. There's, you know, like maybe mice ate their eggshells and broke their eggs, you know, or maybe they got sick, or maybe this, that, and the other. He says, you know what's kind of funny? Whenever we find a dinosaur skeleton, it looks like they drowned. That one didn't work. Oh, well. Okay, never. What's that? Hydraulic event. It's yes. Yes, hydrologic or whatever, yes. Yes, okay, let's just keep going. Dinosaur to bird evolution. Whenever you talk to evolutionists about this, they can look at you somewhat disbelieving. Like, oh, please don't tell me you don't believe in that birds are modern dinosaurs. Oh my goodness. Where do we start with you, poor ignorant soul? You know, because they think that's a slam dunk. So here we go. 2 theories. And this is their theories, okay? One is called large brown bipeds, like this guy on the side there. Incidentally, why do you think he would not make a good bird? I was waiting for somebody to say the obvious. What's right about him? There's almost nothing right here. Everything that's big on this has got to get small. And everything that's small has got to get big. Those arms have got to become big wings. You've got to lose that big heavy tail and these heavy legs. And yeah, and develop hollow bones and feathers. And yeah, there's a few things that go, yeah. So incidentally, they know that that's a bit of a problem, so they come up with the second theory. Small crocodiles from the trees. That's their words. That's their words. So small crocodiles come up trees. They see food out there. They jump. They get the food. They're successful, and they make babies. Okay. Then the babies come around, and they jump out a little further. And they do a little better. Okay? Then the next baby, for some fortunate, lucky reason, who knows, has wing flaps and can sail, kind of like a flying squirrel kind of thing, can sail and go further. And oh my goodness, can get all the food it wants and make lots of babies. And eventually, those would become wings, and the bumps on their skins would become feathers. And are there any questions? Okay, cold-blooded, past the term warm-blooded, that's a good trick. The lungs have got to be, the lungs on a reptile are very slow breathing, very slow. Whereas a bird, when it's flapping its wings, is basically, so the idea of how the lungs would evolve to that kind of fast Okay, just a few things. Incidentally, scales to feathers. Okay, I'll do it real slowly now so you can see the subtle differences. Whoops. Those are bumps, and that's a follicle coming out from under the skin. Bumps, follicle. You see how close that is. Bumps to follicles. Want me to do it again? So you can just look at it? See it? Okay. What gets me is they think we have faith, and they don't. Okay. All right. You got to have belief. So, birds. Now, where do they think birds came from? They think they came from stuff like this. This is a famous Archaeopteryx found in Solnhofen in Germany, the famous rock quarry there. It was found marvelous, mid-1800s, marvelous fossil of a bird that clearly has a bony tail, long bony tail, and even has claws on the end of its wings. And otherwise kind of looks like a reptile. So, reptile, it's almost like it's on its way to becoming a bird from a lizard. So Archaeopteryx, that started everything. Where is it found? Well, it's found right down in the middle of Jurassic layers. So supposedly about 150 million years old. Okay, flying dinosaurs are lower, therefore considered to be older. And did feathered birds come from flying dinosaurs? No, they did not. No, don't even think that. They came from land animals. You know what's another interesting thing? I know I'm sounding very sarcastic, and again, it's because my wife is not with us. There are two kinds of lizards. And it's based on hips. I should say dinosaurs, based on hips. One are called lizard hips, and one are called bird hips, Ornithian and Saurian. Lizard hips, bird hips. Which do you suppose, lizard hips or bird hips, evolved into birds? Lizard hips. Okay, I don't get that. But anyway, so the ones with hips closest to birds didn't become birds. But here's a problem. Feathered birds are found even deeper, or at least evidence, even below all those other things, all the way down in Triassic. Here is a fossilized track of footprints from a bird, probably about a seagull-sized bird. It is clearly a bird because it's got the backward toe. And it was hopping on this mud. And this mud is Triassic level. That's not good. It's too low. It's 55 million years before the first bird was ever found in the fossil record. And there's footprints of it. This is a challenge. Whenever you see it's significant because we find it's significant means they don't know. They don't have an answer for it. So it's interesting. Now, I feel like I could be the kid in the classroom that says, oh, I think I know what happened. I think I know what happened. What, Stan? I think as the water levels were rising, the flood was rising, and there was this mud, and this bird was in the air, and it was tiring out and pooping out, and I got to hit the ground here somewhere, and came down and landed in this mud and hopped around. Oh, but the water was rising, and so it had to get out of there and took off and got caught up higher up where other birds were caught. Okay, anyway, just a thought. And it's not 55 million years later. Probably a few weeks at the most. Dinosaur evolution by types. You know dinosaurs, and you think dinosaur evolution, you think, well, I mean, when you think dinosaurs, you think evolution. And these are 10 basic families of dinosaurs, and I'd even put bird in there to show you how open-minded I am. And look at, these are the numbers of remains found of these families. Supposedly, this is going back in time or deeper, supposedly it goes back to an imagined ancestor of all dinosaurs. Had to be Triassic at least. Okay, so we must find some fossils of these guys down below them, right? Because we find fossils mixed with the dinosaurs, and surely there's something below them. And no, actually, we haven't found anything on the way to becoming a dinosaur. If you think I'm kidding, this is a dinosaur expert who's an evolutionist. From my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So remember I told you about stasis? They find dinosaurs, they stay the same, and then they're gone in the fossil record. They don't evolve. When you think about dinosaur size, what do you think? Or weight? These are big guys, right? Well, guess what? Dinosaurs got small too, down to the size of chickens. Dinosaurs the size of chickens, which is bigger than some reptiles you can think of today. So, what is the difference between a dinosaur and a regular reptile? And I just gave you a hint that it's not size. Does anybody know? What? Fossils? Come on now. It's in the structure of the body between a dinosaur and a lizard. What's the difference? No, not spine. Good guess. What's that? No, not respiratory. What? I heard something over here. Hips is correct. Very good. Hips. Hips, because hips in lizards today just get them off the body, barely off the ground. I mean, it's really doing this to get around. Whereas dinosaur hips put the legs straight down. 4 legs or 2 legs, it gets the body off the ground. That is the structural difference. It will win you a trivia question prize somewhere, I would think. But anyway, that is the difference. So I'm going to show briefly a little bit of a dinosaur video. And is this coming over? It's plugged in. Okay. We're going to see the dinosaur dig in Wyoming a little bit. In the mid-1800s, when dinosaur bones were being found all around the world, they did much to strengthen Charles Darwin's questioning of the biblical account of creation. There's no question that these bones reveal an ancient world much different than the world in which we're living now. Let's go and take a look at where those dinosaur bones are being found. Let's go to a dig site in the state of Wyoming. You guys could all be participating in if you want.
I got a call from a friend of mine, and he told me about this place in Wyoming where there were a lot of dinosaur bones and that they wanted a creationist to work on it. So I wasn't really initially interested, so I called a colleague of mine who's a vertebrate paleontologist, and he came out and looked at it. Subsequently, he brought me out here, and we looked at it together. And the owner of the ranch is a very wonderful person. Brought me up onto one of these ridges. It's actually very near to here. And he opened up the door of his truck and got out, and he said, "Okay, hop out." And I looked down at the ground. It was covered with dinosaur bones. I couldn't walk on the ground. I had to step nimbly to keep from stepping on them. But that convinced me that I needed to spend time on this, because these bones are being washed away and they're lost to science.
So somewhere, sometime, dinosaurs were here. And what we see behind us, this whole area, these are the main quarries here. There's some outlying quarries. But the main quarries are approximately 1 meter thick and cover quite an area. So the little bits you see here that's already been taken out, a couple other quarries are about 1.5% of what we think the whole bone bed is. We have quite a range of dinosaurs. The main ones are hadrosaurs. They are the duck-billed dinosaurs, 35 feet long, 6 tons, 5 to 6 tons, big ones.
These dinosaurs show a lot of decay took place before they were buried, ultimately buried. They may have been buried and then re-emerged. But the most sensible scenario I can think of is that these dinosaurs were killed probably by drowning or some other cataclysm. And they floated and bloated so that the carcasses were floating on water. They were probably driven onto a shoreline by wind where they rotted for a period of time. And during this time they were rotting, the carnivorous dinosaurs were still around, and they came over and began to eat on these carcasses, because we find the shed teeth of carnivorous dinosaurs, of the theropods. We find those in amongst the bones. Ultimately, the bones were remobilized and transported out into deeper water, and we know that because they occur in a graded bed. So the big bones are at the bottom and the little bones are at the top.
Our project has advanced our view on origins because of the techniques we use. The high precision GPS data allows us to map our bone beds. And by doing so, we've been able to figure out what event led to all these dinosaurs being deposited at this site. Our system is so advanced that the greater scientific community has noticed what we're doing, and we've been able to publish our data. I think this is amazing because not only are we seeing that our deposit was put there by a flood-like event, now that other scientists are examining their bone beds and looking for alternative scenarios, they're also seeing evidence of catastrophic flood events. And even though we can't say this is a global type flood event just yet, we do see more and more evidence for catastrophic flood events resulting in large bone beds.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there, but you get the idea. Incidentally, did you see that long line of bones in that warehouse area that he was at? Hundreds and hundreds of huge bones. And the pictures that we took close up of dinosaur skull and feet are all from that dig site. So if you want to, check out Southwest Adventist University's website, Dino Dig. Okay, commercial over. So, what does the Bible say about dinosaurs as we wind up here? So God created great sea creatures in Genesis 1. This is on day 5. And the word for creatures there is tananim. Tananim for the rest of the Old Testament usually means some kind of reptile. So did he create sea reptiles? Not sure, but my favorite is this one right here at the behemoth. And I know you're going to ask me about Leviathan, but hold off on that. Let's take a look at behemoth. Look now at the behemoth, and that's a Hebrew word that simply means beast. So it's something that, like, it needs no introduction. It's the beast, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See, now his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Now that last statement there, I wanted to know what that meant, and I really did some research, try to figure out from Hebrew scholars what is this saying. And there is a general agreement that it's not talking about chronology. We're not talking about the first one made of many other things. It's really talking about an animal that stood in the first place among all the other animals, like the winner of the most amazing animal contest, top of the pyramid, alpha of alphas. Okay, now if you've got a Bible that has in tiny print on that page, scholars think the behemoth was a, what did they say? I heard it, I think. Somebody say it? Hippopotamus. I don't know about you, but hippopotamus doesn't strike me as like the alpha of all animals, you know, the most amazing. Because look at the description of the tail. He moves or literally sways his tail like a cedar tree. Cedar tree is the largest tree in the Middle East. Have you seen a hippopotamus tail? It doesn't evoke images of a mighty cedar tree. But what does? And their second choice is usually elephant. Elephant, same thing. So, here is a hippopotamus, and Job, for scale, might he be talking about something like this that would remind you of an incredible, amazing animal with a tail, not unlike a giant tree. I'll just let you think about that for a minute because I can hear Adventist wheels turning. That's okay. Incidentally, do we believe in evolution at all, as in change of animals? Did the serpent always stay in that form? Oh, then you believe in evolution? You believe an animal changed, right? Whatever it was before, it's now something different. You are cursed more than all cattle. On your belly you shall go. You shall eat dust. Now, if you could think like a Hebrew for a minute, and this is hard because we're Greeks. So you've got to unscrew your Greek head, put it on and screw on a Hebrew head for a minute and think like a Hebrew. When you think about blessing and cursing, here's where we're talking differences. When you bless somebody, you say, have a nice day. When you curse somebody, they just cut you off in traffic. All right? But in Hebrew thinking, it's way more serious than that. Because to bless something or somebody has made them tangibly better than what they were. They are more than what they were before. Likewise, if you curse something, it is tangibly less than what it was. Are you with me? Okay, this is the Hebrew concept. So when God says this to the serpent will now be less than what it was. He's telling him, you will no longer be beautiful. You will no longer have the ability to trick Eve. She's going to run from you when she sees. In other words, I'm going to take you down a bunch of notches. But notice he says, you're cursed more than all cattle. And all animals are going to feel the effects of sin, and they are all going to come down a few levels from what they originally were created to be. That's what sin does, right? So I told you about the earth was corrupt before God, the end of flesh had come up before him. Violence had filled the earth. How violent did the animals get? Take a look at some of these guys. All your grandkids know these by heart. Anyway, Ankylosaurus, Stegosaurus, and Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus means bonehead, lizard. Anyway, these animals look like they are ready for combat, don't they? Don't they look like they're living in a violent world? Okay, now, for a moment here, I'm going to give you the paraphrase of something Ellen White wrote about apparently dinosaurs, or at least animals before the flood. She said if there was a sin above any other that caused or triggered the flood, it is the base crime of amalgamation of animal and man, which caused the defacement of the image of God in man and caused confusion everywhere. Now, some people have read that and thought she might have been saying amalgamation, which means mixing of man with animal. And Ellen White Estate has made it clear that that's not what she was talking about. It was man with man and animal with animal that caused a defacement of man, of God's image in man, and confusion among the animals. Let me give you evidence. First of all, if she says it's the worst thing that happened, it was the trigger for the flood event, is it going to be in the Bible? Thank you. It's going to be in the Bible. So I'm looking for something that defaced the image of man, that was some kind of mixing event that defaced the image of man. What would that be? So I go to Genesis 6, and I read there, and the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men, that they were fair, and married whomever they wanted to. Take a look at the next verse. God says, I'm done with man, 120 years. That's it. So it was a triggering event for God. Now, Ellen White expands on this by saying that the men before, the sons of God are, please don't say these are angels. These are the godly line from Seth. Seth's line saw pretty women in Cain's line, if we can put it that way, and married out of the church and married idolaters. Ellen White's clear. That's what they did. The result was a defacing of the image of God in man. Man became violent and sinful, only thoughts continually evil in his mind. That's the confusion that's the defacing of the image of man. Now, what about the animals? Because that's really what I'm especially talking about, is animals. She said confused species, animals that were mixed together that weren't supposed to be mixed together. And that was a sin too, and that brought along the flood too. Remember, what's the issue in the flood for God? Violence. That's what God is worried about. So whatever the mixing did caused man to become violent and animals to become violent. And the animals that became violent, I'd like to suggest to you, are animals that were bred for warfare. Does that make some sense? I think they made animals like this so they could take them into war, take them into sports arenas, hunt with them. I don't know. But I think some of these animals do not look like they waddled out of the Garden of Eden to me. And they don't look like they're saying, come pet me. Am I right? Take a look at the Ankylosaurus. He's got spikes coming out of his back and his side. He's got a club for a tail. He's got an armored head. He does not look like something God made back in the Garden of Eden. Okay, Adam, what do you want to name this one? Yeah. You know, I think. So the confused species did not get on the ark. Ellen White makes it clear. But you know what she also says? She says there was a breed of very large animals that God in his mercy decided that man after the flood could not deal with in his diminutive state. So there were basically animals too big, and God let them perish in the flood. Now they had to be, and when she says mammoth animals, she means big. So they couldn't be elephant size or smaller because we got elephants. So it's got to be something bigger than elephants. And what's that going to be? That's going to be these guys, the sauropods, the big four-legged guys. Because I know, because I want one for a pet. But anyway, these perished in the flood because they were too big. Now think about it. After the flood, what's the food supply going to be for these guys? No forest, no nothing. So it's going to take a while. So in any case, God said that after the flood, we're getting smaller, and these are too big. So he let them pass. But he did not destroy them because they were amalgamated. Are you with me on this, Seventh-day Adventists? And so I've had people think the whole line of dinosaurs are amalgamated. And I think that what the devil did was what he loves to do. He takes the very best things that God has created and mess them up. Marriage, Sabbath, and the most colossal line of animals you've ever seen. I think he messed them up with messed up people to use as agents and make them war. I mean, what's man thinking about before the flood? Remember, he's thinking about only evil continually, and yet if he can breed animals, then what is he interested in? Pushing the frontiers of science forward? Let's see what I can do in cloning experiments, and let's see if I can figure a cure for cancer. No, he's only interested in making things to fit his violent world. So what's he motivated to do? He's motivated to make some of these things, and these are the ones that we have preserved in the flood. Okay, anyway. Enough said. Get off that horse. There's another theory about what happened to the dinosaurs. Wrong boat. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of funny. Incidentally, I kind of think I actually believe meteors because I'd love to talk to Pastor Dave and Pastor Joe about some of this. But I have a theology built around throwing rocks. And why God used it as the way to execute people in Israel. Oh, now I got your attention because I think he uses it himself as a judgment tool and wanted us all to experience the miserable things that he goes through and had to. So we would not want it to happen again. Anyway, okay. Yeah, KT boundary, okay. So did animals like dinosaurs, good dinosaurs, get on the flood? What's really interesting is dragon stories from around the world. And what's dragon mean again? Large reptiles. We have these stories of large reptiles all around the world. And whether it's China, whether it's England, wherever it is, it's always a story of this big lizard. And it's not house size, it often says horse size. But there's always one last one in the story. For whatever reason, it's a threat, it's scary, whatever. They take it out in the story so there's no more. And it's like the last one. There's never herds, there's never flocks, multiples, families. It's always like the last one. And it seems like it's the last echoes, the last memories of big lizards around. But I'll leave that to you to decide if that is post-flood or pre-flood memories. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the what? Cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the what? Viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in my holy mountain. So however you interpret that, whatever the animals were before sin entered the world, it sure looks like the reptile world is going to be restored as well. So reptile along with the other worlds. So I'm going to finish with this, this picture. The great dragon was asked out. I'm going to put a real scary head on him. Let's make him scarier looking. Come on. There we go. There's a scary one. All right. So he's scary. And look at the great dinosaur was cast out, because what does dinosaur mean? Terrible lizard, big lizard. What does dragon mean? Big reptile. Kind of similar words. I'm going to interpose it and put it in there. So the great dinosaur was cast out. Now, who deceives the world? Revelation 12 is just in front of what? Revelation 13, which is just in front of Revelation 14. Very good. Okay. Revelation 14 is the end of the world. In other words, the harvest comes at the end. So 12, 13, 14 are all working into last day events. Wouldn't it be interesting when we consider the devil as deceiving the whole world, including maybe receiving the first angel's message properly, that God created the world, right? Worship God as creator. Well, did he really make? Did he really make everything? Deceive the whole world. And what image does he use? Doesn't he use a dinosaur image to fool people? Because when people see a dinosaur, don't they typically go, oh, a dinosaur, yeah, millions of years. Not the Bible. Am I right? An effective image to use to deceive the world into thinking we weren't created by a loving creator in his image. All right, I'm done with dinosaurs. Do you have any questions? And yes, I've got some bits and pieces of genuine dinosaurs up here that you can't look at right now.
So what would you guess then on the creation week? They were created as the creeping things on the ark? What
Creeping things, that was day 6. Day 6 on dry land. Yeah. Well, he said he made it, which I made along with you, mankind, God said. Yeah. Anybody else? Good question. Now, yeah, I'm surprised you're not hitting me more with amalgamation. Let's go.
I'm intrigued by the idea of the fact that they had huge brains. They were around a long time. In other words, the scientists before.
Yes, yes.
I think they were way ahead of us in terms of DNA, crossbreeding, amalgamation, meaning.
I don't think we could do what they did, that's for sure. Yeah, with dinosaurs.
In other words, we have a CRISPR, and we can slice up DNA and mix it all together. They must have had some of their, even the race of creatures was more fertile and dynamic.
Oh, I think so. Yes, yes.
So they could actually cross a lizard and a bird.
I think so. Well, yeah, I don't know how far it could go, but yes, I think so. Remember my earlier discussion about the animals, pre-flood animals, having superior DNA and being able to reproduce wider varieties of things than they can do now, because we're all degenerate. You looked in the mirror lately? Yes.
Stories about mermaids and centaurs, are they based in fact or just some mythology?
Well, people made a big deal out of, for instance, the Egyptian gods have human bodies and animal heads and things like that. I suppose that could be remnants of ancient memories of scientists fooling around with stuff like that.
Well, they're doing that now. They're putting human parts into animals, putting animal parts into people, putting electronics into things. Why wouldn't they have done that with things? Except in a different way because they were smarter than us.
It's not hard to be smarter than us, is it? Yeah, we're thinking, wow, they were really advanced. Didn't take much. I guess I don't know. I don't have enough information on that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, did you hear me talking about Nephilim? The Hebrew word Nephilim. The Nephilim, actually the root of Nephilim could be translated the fallers, as in falling trees. Zach? cutting trees down, fallers, the ones that cut things down. Now, if that's a reference to the violence of the men, that they cut people down, that's kind of interesting. But what I said earlier was that the Septuagint, which is closer historically to the original word, obviously, of Moses, they thought the word meant giants, gigantes. King James ran with that when they translated it. And so that's why we have a lot of them in our Bibles. So giants in the land.
Cousins don't produce giants.
What?
Cousins, they would be cousins from Cain and Seth. They would be cousins.
Oh, okay.
Cousins getting together don't produce giants.
They don't now with our DNA as broken down as it is. But way back when God created everything pretty good, apparently the brothers and sisters could.
What about the six-fingered ones?
Well, yeah, no, we got problems now. Did I answer that very well, Dave? Pastor, was that okay? Yeah, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think that we need to be careful that we don't necessarily connect those two.
Which?
That they interbred with the sons of God and the daughters of men, and there were giants in the land. Those could be two separate statements.
Yes, well, the giants in the land is a reference mentioned at the time of the flood, that the people living at the time of the flood. So it's kind of like, incidentally, there were giants in the land in those days.
So I seem to remember being a while back at one of your things, and you actually talked about how big Adam was, and he had a leg bone or something. And how big if we're talking dinosaurs, were the men back then?
Well, you could probably slam dunk a basketball like that, which is a dream of every red-blooded American male that I know of.
Maybe 9 feet?
Ellen White does make some comments about the height. Help me out here. 12 to 15, 16? Twice as tall, yeah. Yeah, well, when you're talking about, let's say twice as tall, for instance, then you're expanding the size of the brain, all dimensions. I could use a little of that. Yes.
I've heard mention that reptiles don't stop growing. And if that would be true, and they live for many, 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 many years, certain reptiles can become very large. Would that be any kind of explanation for some of the large animals at the time?
Yes, I think so. I'm not sure if that's an unending growth, but that the growth pattern is very long, yes. No question about that. So, yeah.
And some people speculate that the perfect world before the flood was a perfect ecosystem, and the oxygen level was greater than it is now, and everything, so everything would be tolerant.
There,
Weather was perfect, so everything would just shoot out of the ground.
probably, yes. You could practically watch plants grow. And incidentally, if that were the case, that's exactly why God would need giant hedge trimmers. I've heard lots of models about the pre-flood atmosphere, and it's all over the place, different ideas on it. But no question it would be healthier. I still am trying to get my head around why we got from 900 to 90 and slow down that way, which is, you could say it's faster, you age quicker. What did that? And please don't tell me it's eating Big Macs. It's more than that. And I think it might have to do with gamma ray radiation, and somehow or other the atmosphere is not protecting us like it used to be, and it damages our cells and we age. I'm not a scientist, so it's just a thought. Yes. Yes, yes. I don't know enough about it to give you really hard facts, but it's what I've heard as well. The complexity, remember it's the complexity, because the more they study things, the more complex they become. And when you start to look at biology and what biology does on its own, it doesn't create any of this. So the complexity of the human brain, understand that this is way many, maybe a million times more complex than a Mac computer, and yet it's biological, chemical. Explain that. How do you store memories? I mean, incidentally, you know what happens when we die? This is my thinking. God has a thumb drive and puts us on a thumb drive. And someday we're getting a new body. That's in language I can understand. Yes. Yes. Well, yes. In Berkeley? Oh, that haven of conservatism. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. How about that? Yes. I did meet him, and wasn't he the guy that was in the atomic testing for World War II, the atomic bomb thing? Wasn't he some nuclear guy that was working on that?
He's the one that, when you go around the different signs around the valley, you'll discover, about the ice was 400 feet thick over the top of Portal Lake.
I guess I'm not quite sure if that's the guy. But yes, what was your point about him?
My point was in terms of, are we going to get into the idea of the ice age and what happened?
The Ice Age, I can just tell you briefly. You want to know what happened? Here it is. I did a slide earlier. That's all you need to know. What they cannot figure out is how you can have a summer in this far south in the North American hemisphere that does not get warm enough to melt the ice. So the ice has to stay through the summer. There's a very short list of the things that can happen in nature that can do that. But at the top of the list is a volcanic eruption that covers a protective blanket and makes the land really cold. And at the end of the flood and during the last half of the flood, the volcanoes on planet Earth were going nuts. And and so to me, it was just a period of time of instability in the atmosphere of the Earth, back and forth until it finally stabilized. To me, it's the only thing that explains it.
Since we accept that only 8 people survived,
Yeah. Yes.
where do you think all these other cultures came up with their rendition of a flood?
From a corporate memory of a real flood. Why there are variations on it? Oh, why are there variations on the sacrificial system? Why do animals get sacrificed in different parts of the world? It's clearly based originally on God's plan for salvation, and yet it's been mixed up with all kinds of paganism. And I just think that you got to go back to the source for the pure original story.
But if everybody else died and there's only 8 people, did these 8 people then, did they get the information from Noah and his family?
Well, yeah, I guess so. Sure, the family would remember. Yeah, the 3 sons, the wives, and they would perpetuate stories. And you know how stories go. After a few generations, they get embellished a little bit. Some details are lost. I did some family research in my family, and there was one lady that supposedly, oh, no question, she was Native American. I went back to the census records, and she was from Ireland. That's about as wrong as you can be. She had a corncob pipe. That part maybe was true. Did I see anything else? Okay. One more here, and one more here. What?
You pointed to an animal there that you said was the size of a giraffe.
Yes.
Which one was it?
A hadrosaur. That's the one that they're digging up at that dig in Wyoming a lot of.
What's it called?
Well, in the family, it's a hadrosaur. The specific is an Edmontosaurus. named after Edmonton, Edmontosaurus. So that's the variety of hadrosaur it is. Does that answer? Okay. There was another question?
Many cultures have a fire-spewing dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any basis or facts or?
I don't know if any of you seen one do that. I don't know. Whether it was and Leviathan supposedly did some of that. And, but the Leviathan also caused the water to boil. And if you've ever seen a Nile crocodile with prey in its mouth, it spins rapidly. And it makes it look like the water is boiling. And when they have said, I think Leviathan is a Nile crocodile, that makes some sense to me.
Joe mentioned something that blows fire out its mouth.
That's Leviathan, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure.
I have a question. If you look into the old vintage type Bibles, the really large ones, of course it says in the Bible, it talks about unicorns. In the vintage Bible, in the photograph that was painted, it shows a horse with a horn.
Yeah.
But we did some research, and then correct me if I'm incorrect, and we understand that it was actually a rhinoceros as what it was referring to rather than an actual horse with horns.
I have got, and I already tried to impress your pastor with it, but he was bored, I think, when I showed it to him. I mean, go figure. I have a 1611 King James Bible, and I just currently am reading through it for my own devotions. It's total fun. I love the ancient English language. And so there you see where some of the words were changed in later translations. Did you know King James was revised 4 times? Know that? Anyway, the latest one was 1789 or so. And a guy named Barclay, was it? But anyway, he's the one you should thank for your King James today. But the ones before, whoa, real different. And spelling was different all over. But they have unicorns. They have dragons regularly mentioned in the Old Testament. And when you look at the more modern understanding of what those words are, sometimes there's some differences. I've heard that the ibex, which is an African antelope type animal, when it's looked sideways, looks like it has 1 horn when there's 2. And some people wondered if that's what it was. But if it's a rhinoceros, that's cool. I'm good with that. So anyway, shall we have a break? What do you do? Yeah, let's do an intermission, and let's do 10 minutes. And I realize that we're running on a little bit, but if you want to come up and take a look at some of these things, I'll try to answer questions. But let's see, 3:30 sharp is what we will start at. 3:30 sharp, okay? Go.